morning, everyone. Today is my turn presenting John. And source is the Lancet. It was published in year 2019 and volume 373, issue 966, and uh, it was given in 6th February on 6th February 2009. Pages are from 408 to 415. The title of the journal is Global Pattern of Experience and Anticipated Discrimination Against People with Schizophrenia. It is a cross-sectional survey. Now, the critical evaluation of the title. It is short, it is informative, and the title adequately describes the nature of the study and informs about collecting data from around the world. Now, the authors are Graham Thornycroft, Elaine Roman, Diana Rose, Norman Sartorius, Morgan Lees from the Indigo Study Group, and the other members are listed at the end of the paper. Now the summary, the background, it means many people with schizophrenia experience stigma caused by other people's knowledge, attitudes, and behavior. This can lead to impoverishment, social marginalism, and low quality of life. We aim to describe the nature, direction, and severity of anticipated and experienced discrimination reported by people with schizophrenia. The methods used were we did a cross-sectional survey in 27 countries in centers affiliated to the Indigo Research Network by use of face-to-face interviews with 732 participants. Discrimination was measured with the newly validated discrimination and stigma scale, which produces three subscales: positive experience discrimination, negative experience discrimination, and the anticipated discrimination. The findings were that the negative discrimination was experienced by 344 of 729 participants in making or keeping friends, by 315 of 728 for family members, and 209 of 724 in finding a job, 215 of 730 in keeping a job, and by 196 of 724 in intimate or sexual relationships. Positive experience discrimination was rare, and anticipated discrimination affecting 469 applying to work, training, or education, 402 looking for close relationships, and 526 felt the need to conceal their diagnosis. For a third of the participants anticipated discrimination for job seeking and close personal relationships when no discrimination was experienced. Now, the interpretation was that the rates of both anticipated and experienced discrimination are consistently high across the country among people with mental illness. Measures such as disability discrimination laws might therefore not be effective without intervention to improve the self-esteem of people with mental illness. Funding was done by South London and Maudsley Energy Foundation Trustees, UK Department of Health, Program, German Ministry of Education and Research. Now, the critical evaluation of the survey, it adequately reflects the study, provides the aim of the study, mention the type of study number of participants, type of participants, along with the number of countries involved. Mention the manner of data collection and the scale. Result mentioned in brief along with the interpretation, and the keywords are not mentioned. Now, the introduction. Stigma is an overarching term including problems of knowledge, ignorance and misinformation, attitudes, prejudice, and behavior discrimination. Stigma produces changes in feelings, attitude, and behavior for both people affected, lower self-esteem, poorer self-care, and social withdrawal in family. Research on stigma and mental illness has had several limitations. It has made few connections with clinical practice or health. It has largely been descriptive concerning surveys of public attitudes, a portrayal of mental illnesses, and violence by the media. Systemic assessments of the experiences people with mental illness in different parts of the world are few. The core experience of shame and blame are common, although they are very rare between cultures. By comparison with other disorders, mental illnesses are typically more stigmatized, and this has been called the ultimate stigma. Finally, the behavioral consequence of stigma seem to affect most people with mental illness. Nevertheless, little is known about how much process affect their everyday living. Most research on stigma and mental illnesses consists of surveys of attitudes investigating what people would do in imaginary situations or what they think most people would do. For example, when faced with neighbor or work colleague with mental illness, such investigations emphasize what healthy people might say, rather than the experience of people with mental illness. The research also assumes that such statements are linked with behavior without assessing behavior directly. In short, with some clear exceptions, research has focused on hypothetical rather than real situations, has been shown of emotions and feelings, has been divorced from context, has addressed stigma indirectly rather than directly, and has not provided clear answers on how to intervene or reduce the social effects. In this article, we define discrimination as unjust distinction in treatment of different categories of people. Discrimination can cause low rates of seeking help, a lack of access to care, undertreatment, material poverty, and social marginalization. These effects can be consequences of experienced discrimination, being unreasonably rejected in job application, or they can be a consequence of anticipated discrimination. Example, when an individual does not apply for a job because he or she fully expects to fail in such application. The distinction between experienced and anticipated discrimination is closely related to what has been described as the difference between enacted and felt stigma. Enacted stigma comprises events of negative discrimination, whereas felt stigma includes the experience of shame of having a disorder and the fear of encountering enacted stigma and is associated with lower self. We examine the occurrence of both experienced and anticipated discrimination and their interrelationships among people with schizophrenia, one of the stigmatized mental disorders. Because of the lack of research, we cannot generate evidence-based hypotheses. Nevertheless, the primary focus of this article is on the nature, direction, and the degree of discrimination reported by people with schizophrenia. We develop a new scale to measure discrimination and analyze the relation between experienced and anticipated discrimination. Now, the critical evaluation of the introduction is long and repetitive. It defines stigma and discrimination, describes their effect and their relation, describes the limitation of previous research and need to do this survey. There is no hypothesis. The aim and objectives are not mentioned very clearly. Now, the method study sites in 27 countries were defined through contact with members of World Psychiatric Association global programs against stigma and discrimination because of schizophrenia and associated centers active in stigma related research joined the WPA group to establish the Indigo network. Within centers, site directors were asked to identify 25 participants who were, in their judgment, reasonably representative of all people with a clinical diagnosis of schizophrenia in treatment with local psychiatric services, including those in inpatient, day patient, outpatient, and community settings. 732 people were with a clinical diagnosis of schizophrenia took part in the study. The participants provided with written informed consent. The study was approved by the appropriate ethical review board in each of the sites. Now, the critical evaluation of the participants, it has selection bias. Participants selected as per the judgment of the site directors and not randomly. There is sampling bias present. A sample of 25 participants is too small to represent a target population of the country, and 27 countries cannot represent all 195. 732 purposefully selected participants cannot represent all patients with schizophrenia in the world, and thus the result of the survey cannot be generalized. There is an admission bias, including patients in treatment with local psychiatric services. The written and informed consent was taken. Study was approved by the ethical review board. It was not mentioned whether ICD-10 or DSM-4 criteria or DSM-5 criteria was used to establish the diagnosis of schizophrenia. The inclusion and exclusion criteria are not mentioned, and the study period and duration is not mentioned. The scale study this was developed particularly for this study by the use of direct interview data. This scale provides an assessment of experience and anticipated discrimination from the perspective of users of mental health. Scale allows the quantitative and qualitative appraisal of responses. Training manual was used by all sites to achieve consistent interpretation of all the scale items. Several sites also received on-site on telephone training is used for the scale. 5 of the interviews at each site were recorded verbatim, transcribed, translated into English, and quantitatively analyzed by the study coordinator. Translation and cross-cultural adaptation into this 10 was done to develop language equivalent versions of the scale. The scale was translated from English to the local language in forward and backward translation. 3 subscores were generated. The first The 3 subscores are generated. The first subscore indicates total positive experience discrimination. This is the count of total instances of endorsement of positive scale points, light, moderate, and strong advantage for the first 32 items. The second subscore indicates the total negative experience discrimination and is calculated in the same way. The third subscore is generated from the 4 anticipated discrimination items, each score not at all, a little, moderately, and a lot. Socio-demographic and clinical data were collected as a part of the interview and included the age, sex, years since first contact with mental health services, work status, education, current mental health care, knowledge of clinical diagnosis, agreement with the diagnosis. Now, the critical evaluation of the data collection. There is an interviewer bias, although trained but multiple interviewers collected the data for the survey. Instrument bias, this was not converted to all the local target language. Example, this is not available in Hindi. So either the interviewer translated the questions of the scale to the local language by himself or highlights the sampling bias again. As the interviewer must have then used English, the participants would have been educated or belong to better socio-economic class, had a better support system, and all these are good prognostic factors of schizophrenia. The sample won't represent the patients with schizophrenia. Not all questions of this are applicable in all countries or all states of the country. Example, getting welfare benefit or disability pension for diagnosis of schizophrenia is not available in the data analysis. Analysis were done with SPSS, version 15, and startup. Summary statistics for individual countries were completed in New York for counts of both experience and anticipated discrimination. A regression analysis was done with experience discrimination as a dependent variable and the anticipated discrimination, sex, years since first contact with mental illness, and compulsory treatment, work status, years of education, agreement with diagnosis, and current type of mental health care with independent variables. So that there is an advantage, there is an shows that the age finding was 39. People with schizophrenia commonly experience negative discrimination, making or keeping friends from family members in both finding and keeping jobs and in intimate or sexual relationships. Positive experience discrimination was rare but most common in relationships with family members and obtaining benefits. Anticipated discrimination for job seeking and close personal relationships was more common than experienced discrimination in these domains. The study used interviews to gather direct reports from people with mental illness, both of discrimination that was actually experienced rather than hypothetical scenarios or vignettes, as using stigma attitude scale, and that was anticipated, which may also have profound consequences. The key limitations of this study are the sample collection was based on individuals treated rather than true prevalent cases, and that the lifetime ever experiences of discrimination were recorded without respect to when such events occur. However, in most countries' studies, most people with schizophrenia will receive treatment. In addition to this study, we have not taken into account how far experienced discrimination as reported by service users might be reasonable. For example, a decision by an employer to employ a job applicant who is disabled by mental illness and so which cannot be fairness be attributed to discrimination. By the same token, we have not assessed other possible reasons for discrimination against particular individuals, for example, the relation to age, sex, or ethnic region, where they may seem an unmodifiable source of discrimination, whereas a mental illness is treatable. Such distinctions await further study. Scoring ignores the magnitude of these experiences of combining slight, moderate, and severe categories. A main reason for the decision to combine scores was to present an overview of the experiences of the total sample. The mean scores per patient could not be interpreted in the context of very specific experiences because several items had a high level of not applicable responses. For example, 88% of the responders could not comment on being treated differently during pregnancy or childbirth. In two important discrimination domains, work and personal relationships, slightly more than half of the participants anticipated discrimination but did not experience discrimination. This finding indicates the importance of including in strategies of stigma reduction methods that increase the self-esteem of people with mental illness and has important implications for education of employers about mental health. This study has not been able to investigate in any detail complex features of stigma and discrimination that might apply in culture or context specific settings. For example, these are the indications in some cultures that shame, guilt, embarrassment, and loss of face, both individuals and kinship group, may powerful factors that shape how stigma and discrimination are felt. The multiple regression analysis provides initial evidence for factors associated with higher level of incidence of negative experience discrimination increasing years since first contact with mental health services and having received compulsory treatment. Thus, even allowing for the possible effect of anticipated discrimination, influencing patients' views of their experiences, negative experience discrimination in many domains of life might be related to prior coercive mental illness services intervention. If confirmed by further studies, this finding might guide mental health services to promote social inclusion and to rely less upon compulsory treatment in the future. The conflict of interest statement is that we declare that we do not have any conflict of interest. Now, the critical evaluation of the discussion, the result obtained was discussed as per the three subscore categories of this scale to provide a better picture that describe the manner in which this study is different and better than the previous studies done over stigma and discrimination. The limitations of the study were clearly explained starting from the sample selection to the data analysis. There were no comments about how the severity of schizophrenia might have affected the result of our discrimination.
ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक, ठीक, ठीक है, मैं बात करता हूँ, भेजता हूँ। विषय तो रिलीज करती
on manifest आज किया natural भी
जब एक बार